opportunity to write all the insights about Silent Way, Suggestopedia, and community language learning. But those insights are going to be shared by watching some videos. The first video that we are going to watch is about the silent way. Here you are going to watch the explanation and a little bit about the procedure the professor implemented for developing her lesson by following the silent way procedures. So let's watch, and here you will write all the insights that you could observe. Is that any comment, any question or doubt before we start?
No, teacher.
All right, so let's watch it. Ready? Go. Please let me know if you listen the sound of the video. Well, the first minutes didn't include sound. When the professor is talking, let me know.
The silent way is an approach to foreign language
Yes,
teaching
we can hear.
that was developed by Caleb Kate.
All right, thank you. So let's listen.
The silent way is an approach to foreign language teaching that was developed by Caleb Cateno in the early 1960s. And it's a unique approach to foreign language teaching and learning because, since it's called the silent way, and at first people say, well, why is it called the silent way if it has to do with language and language learning? Well, it's silent way because the teacher is silent and can focus on the learning of the students. So it's unique also in the sense that there is no textbook use, and we do use props that facilitate the learning. Caleb Gattegno, a man who was born in Egypt in, I believe, 1911, and he passed away in 1988. He developed the approach based on his own experience of learning a foreign language. He was not satisfied with the more traditional translation type of and drill-like teaching and learning, and he experimented and he developed this approach. I use the props. They're not absolutely necessary, but they do facilitate. So what I do is, first of all, I have my students, they need to be on board. They need to understand what the process is so that they're not scared of it. They have no textbook to latch on to, and sometimes they don't even have the teacher to latch on to. Because as I tell them from the very beginning, the focus is on them. And sometimes I disappear to the back side of the class so that no one sees me, and the focus really is on them. Takes a lot of patience on my part as an instructor, and a lot of understanding and a lot of observing of students learning. What I love about the approach is that it's all based on discovery, and students really discover the language. They don't memorize. Hopefully they won't forget. But it's those tiny and sometimes huge moments of discovery that completely make this worthwhile.
Color S Ona Regleta. Tus oh. JK color S tus regletas. Son. JK color son tus regletas. Son.
Mis regletas, what does that mean?
The way it compares to other approaches is that the silent way is slower because in the silent way we focus on quality rather than quantity. I've taught with many different approaches. I've learned approaches, and I've even taught different approaches to other instructors. And what I see is that most methods, most approaches use a textbook where students are required to memorize, to learn lots of vocabulary, lots of structure, lots of culture. But what they're missing is really the basis and the essence of the language. And with the silent way, again, it's based on quality rather than quantity. And so you really focus on the building blocks, the patterns and the structure of the language, and then you can build. You're constructing something, and it stays with you.
I've taken Spanish for 5 years, and all of it has been with the textbook and the lecture, and I failed it twice, and it was horrible. So this has definitely helped to have better grades. I feel like I'm actually learning the language instead of just getting by with group activities and just speaking and just observing. I mean, less lectures and more interaction. That was the key.
The steps involved for the silent way for students, they just need to be more observant and willing to let go and willing to discover the language. Their attitude needs to be positive. And for the teacher as well. I think key with the silent way is a lot of love. The instructor needs to love the language and love to teach and love his or her students in the sense of loving the process and seeing them go through that process. There's a creation of a community in the classroom, and an instructor needs to be able to be sensitive enough for that. Not all students are at the same level all the time, and it takes an instructor who really loves what he or she does and really accepts the students for who they are to bring them all on board, all together. From my perspective, I feel that students are having fun. It's sort of like a game. We don't use the props all the time. There comes a time when we use other things in class, maybe objects in the classroom or ideas. And it never seems as though it's a boring class, because I walk into class never knowing what is going to happen. I plan, kind of, because I know what the structure of the Spanish language is. So I know where we're going, and I know the elements that are important to teach and to learn. But the curriculum is really guided by the students. If they want to express something and they don't have that structure or that word, that's where we go. And there's a lot of improvisation, but a lot of thinking behind it. And so I just want to say that from my perspective, I'm having fun, but also students are having fun.
All right, so now we are going to check what you could write here in the silent way, quality rather than quantity, definitely. Syllabus based on vocabulary. Okay, this one goes here, but with green, because it's talking about the type of the syllabus. Use of color rods. Teacher uses gestures, students willing to discover, and the use of props and objects. Yep, definitely. Silent way is lower and focusing quality. Includes lots of vocabulary, instructions, and culture. All right. Excellent. That was the first view of silent way. Now we are going to watch this video. I will try to make, to play it some scenes forward, since some of the techniques are quite similar to the video that we saw it. So now what we are going to play it first of all is to watch Liane Larsen Freeman giving her introduction about the silent way. And I think that also she appears at the end. So let's watch it.
Caleb Catania was another methodologist who believed that language learning could occur at a much faster rate than normally transpires. What often happens, however, is that teaching interferes with learning. To prevent this from occurring, the central principle of Catania's silent way is that teaching should be subordinated to learning. This means, in part, that the teacher bases his lesson on what the students are learning at the moment, not what he wants to teach them. Watch how this principle is put into practice in the demonstration of the silent way, which follows, taught by my colleague, Donald Freeman. After the teacher greets the students, we skip to where the teacher is reviewing some of the words the students will use that day by pointing to them on a Fidel, a color-coded word chart on which each English sound is assigned a distinctive color. He focuses on the differences in pronunciation between the and the.
In this afternoon's lesson, we're going to work on describing a house. They're not the same. Look. No.
Check the emphasis in pronunciation, but also with the use of the colors to emphasize where the stressed syllable lies. Check this technique.
They're not the same. Look. No. No, look. What is it? Yes, more open, Hassan. Everybody. Okay, good. Okay, so you all front row, come around the table here. What do you call this? Do you know? Of a house?
Is a fence?
Kind of like a fence. It's called a floor plan. Have you ever heard that? What's a floor plan? Do you know? A floor plan. Does it?
The place where you build the house.
Okay, right. Good. So let's start here. Okay. What do we have here? What's this?
Entrance. Door.
Yeah.
Door.
Maestro, ese video creo que ya lo habíamos visto.
Silent way?
Sí, ya lo habíamos visto.
Let me check, because what I quite remember was not silent way, but total physical response.
Ambos.
Professor, I don't remember that we saw that video.
Nor do I.
Me neither.
That's why I'm looking for the ones that we saw. They are quite similar, but this one we didn't.
All right, maybe I saw it alone. I thought we saw it in class, but never mind.
What the one that in fact we saw is this one, total physical response. So check how it also starts with
And that a baby spends many months.
That everybody loves to do. We all need.
So it's a series of videos. They seem alike at the beginning with the presentation. Then Dialers and Freeman explaining a little bit, and then it continues by the teacher.
In order to clean the house, we need.
But the one that we currently are watching, it's the first time we are seeing. Probably it may have appeared previously in a YouTube list, but it's the first time. So we are going to continue watching.
Right.
The door.
Gideon.
The door. The door. The door. The door.
Check here the technique that the professor is applying. He is only pointing at the specific place, then by only making gestures, the professor is confirming if students are pronouncing correct. If some student is not pronouncing in the right form, that's why the professor uses his other blackboard.
Gideon.
The door.
Only the mumble of the teacher by saying, hey, pay attention. And then the teacher points at the blackboard where some sounds similar to the one that the professor wants his student produces is checking.
The door. The door. The door. The door.
Which door?
And then, as you could notice, teacher in that moment is giving students a little of confidence so that students can pronounce, can realize how the sound should be produced. So let's continue. This is one of the techniques. And that's why, to some extent, this method is called silent way.
Front door. The front door. The hall.
Take that out.
The front door. Hall. The front hall.
And this?
The other technique that the professor applies is using his fingers. By only where we may say, by only presenting one of the fingers, students need to produce the words. Each of the fingers tries to figure it out.
The back door.
The back hall.
And the
Front door. Hall.
okay, so
The front hall.
The other technique As you could listen, Professor is tapping his fingers. This is the other technique of the silent way. By producing those sounds, students need to be aware of the rhythm of the sentence, how they need to pronounce the words, and at the same time, they try to make the association by listening to those tapping to how many words students need to say. This is the other technique of this method. You can use your fingers to tap, and then students need to produce the sounds.
Everyone.
The front hall, the back hall.
Okay. What about this room?
Living room.
Don't forget this word.
The living room.
Okay. What is it?
The living room. The living room.
And
the
here?
bedroom.
No.
The kitchen.
Let's put that here, okay? So this is
The living room. The kitchen. The kitchen.
Dining room.
Oh, dining room.
again.
The dining room.
Okay, Abdurrahman.
Once again, teachers' facial gestures are really important. Why? Because instead of pronouncing, no, you are right, that gesture, that facial gesture, makes student aware that his or her response was not correct. Notice how, again, teachers' gestures, teachers' facial gestures are so important to put into practice the silent way. Indeed, that's the second characteristic why this method is called silent.
The bedroom.
Again?
The bedroom.
Careful.
Bedroom. The bed.
What's the sound?
Bed.
Okay, so everyone?
Bedroom.
Don't forget.
The bedroom. The kitchen. The kitchen. The living room. The dining room.
Start here.
The sidewalk. The sidewalk. The other side.
Keep going.
The other side.
Okay, so start here.
The sidewalk. The other sidewalk. The front wall. The other front wall.
Just a minute. Gideon.
The front wall.
Now, Jesus, put living room with it.
The living room.
You need to use this word.
Living.
Gideon. Yeah, shall you? But start here.
The wall.
The wall.
But which one? That's a wall of the living room.
The front wall.
The front wall of the living room.
So my question is, why do you think those words are placed in that blackboard and also with different colors? Why do you think they appear there? And thus try to remember what you read. Why those words appear in that way and why in colors? Before we continue.
Well, phonemes are related to colors.
All right, someone else? Remember, I cannot see if someone has raised your hand. No, nobody. Remember that the use of colors and only with some words, it's in order for students to emphasize sounds, phonemes. And then that's why the teacher is now emphasizing the pronunciation of some words with the description of the house, and then that's why the teacher only goes back to the blackboard just by pointing at a specific word. so that students try to make the association of how the word in the Blackboard sounds. It's quite similar to the sound, the word, the actual word the student needs to describe the house. So don't forget that issue. Let's watch it.
Yeah. But start here.
The wall of the wall.
But which one? That's a wall of the living room.
The front wall of the living room. The side wall of the living room. The back wall of the dining room. The back wall of the kitchen. The side wall of the kitchen.
Here again, notice how the teacher is using this stick. By using that stick, he is in silent, he keeps silent. The idea is that the students produce the sentences, and only the teacher limits to point at what the teacher needs to listen from the student. Another question about this. Do you consider that students are active in this process of learning? Do they really are active learners? What do you think? Why yes or why not?
Yes, why they are participating.
Someone else?
I think that they are passive or active. I can listen, but well, okay. Because sometimes, well, they are start to participate when the teacher says, but at the same time they are listening to the other classmates. So I think that they are both roles.
All right. So now, don't get distracted only for the fact that they need to produce the sounds only because they need to formulate some sentences. It is just the appearance. It may show that students are actively participating. This is something shocking, but it is true. They are not really the protagonist of the lesson. Students are not the protagonist of the lesson. Why? They are asked by the professor to participate, but they do not willingly participate. First issue. Second issue. Students are forced by the teacher to produce the language the teacher is demanding. They are not creating by themselves some language items. Indeed, the teacher is the one who guides them to produce some specific language items. However, what we can say is that the protagonist of the lesson is students' learning process, but not whatever process. Cognitive learning process. The protagonist of this lesson is students' cognitive learning process. They are not students by themselves. Rather, students' cognitive learning process is the protagonist. And obviously, in order that protagonist emerges, the teacher needs to be silent. Additionally, the teacher is the one in charge for making that student's cognitive learning process to emerge. Students are not the ones who willingly are going to make it happen. they are guided by the professor. So let's continue.
Let's change groups now, and the other group come and sit down. Okay?
Table.
Sitting? A bed? A bed in the living room?
A table.
Okay.
Chair.
Maybe sofa.
Siti, what shall we make it?
Sofa.
Okay. Which is it? This or this?
There.
Okay. So we're on a table, Charlie. Okay, what kind of a table is this?
Near
Methodist, yeah?
Coffee table.
Which one?
Is the coffee table.
Okay, now where shall I put it?
in front of the sofa.
In front of the sofa.
Yes.
Oh.
Close to the sofa.
Yeah.
In front, close to the sofa.
In front of
this sofa.
Check again the same technique with the fingers of the professor.
In front of.
Keep going. The
sofa.
close.
Close to it.
Good. Felix, can you say
In
the thing?
front of the sofa, close to it.
From the start.
Put
it
Okay.
at
near
the one end of the sofa. One end of the sofa.
near
Near
the other side wall.
Near the outside wall. Okay. So could you say the whole sentence, Shai?
Put one.
Put
Put it.
Mhm.
At one end of the sofa near the other side wall.
Okay. Okay, so something that you learned that was new about the house. I'd like you each to write one sentence.
Now students need to remember what they heard, what they learned about the house, and then they need to write it in a piece of paper.
Okay. Could you read some of your sentences? Hassan, what do you have?
The dining room table.
That's not a sentence, though.
The dining room table is in the dining room.
Again?
The dining room table is in the dining room.
Okay.
The dining room is in face of the bedroom.
Okay.
Facing the bedroom.
In French, that's okay, but in English, we change it just a little bit.
Facing. Is facing.
Yeah, but careful.
Facing.
So, Maria, your sentence then?
The living room is facing the dining room.
Right. Because it's hard to know where the front is.
Well, you're not supposed the front is where the front door is.
That's the front, but it doesn't mean that that's where in front of is. Because in front can change, right? This chair is in front of the table. Good. Titi.
Other.
At the end of the table, but say yours again.
The recorder is on the side table of the sofa in the living room.
Okay, and you can change side for this word.
And
Check here how lexical items are also part of the lesson. It's not only based on pronunciation, but also in lexical items. But grammatical lexical items are also emphasized. So now here is the proof that this method is also based around grammatical items. Let's continue.
The recorder?
The recorder is on the side, on the end table of the sofa in the living room.
Good. The prepositions? Didi, anything? Did you learn anything new from this?
Students not only learn about words, but also about prepositions and the way good for structuring sentences.
Try to put the furniture.
By beginning the lesson with a Fidel chart, something with which the students are familiar, the teacher can build from the known to the unknown. The teacher next constructed a floor plan with Cuisenaire rods. He elicited from the students the relevant vocabulary. He had the basic structure in mind, but he let the students take responsibility for guiding the construction of the floor plan. The teacher respects the intelligence of his students and gives only what help is necessary.
Diane Larsen Freeman says, respects the intelligence of students. That's why I mentioned some minutes ago that the protagonist is not indeed the students, but the cognitive process of learning. So students' cognitive learning process. That's the protagonist of the lesson. Not students per se, but their cognitive process.
Tenya believed that language is
Also, you may take note about here what it is said. Language is not learned by repeating after a model, but students need to develop their own inner criteria for correctness. And also here what it is said, teaching should be subordinated to learning, not the other way around. That's why, again, I repeat, the protagonist of the lesson is students' cognitive learning process. In other ways, teaching should be subordinated to learning. That's the other principle. The other way of thinking how language should be learned.
is not learned by repeating after a model. Students need to develop their own inner criteria for correctness, to trust and to be responsible for their own production in the target language. In fact, he was fond of saying the teacher works with the students while the students work on the language. You may have noticed they need to develop their own inner criteria for correctness, to trust and to be responsible for their own production in the target language.
Students' own production, yes, but guided by the teacher. But please pay attention to the next statement of Larsen Freeman. This is something curious, but at the same time, this is another characteristic of this method.
In fact, he was fond of saying the teacher works with the students while the students work on the language.
Professor works with the students, but students work on the language.
You may have noticed that the teacher spent a lot of time working with the students' errors. Errors are important and necessary to learning. They show the teacher how the students understand what he is teaching, and specifically where things are unclear. The teacher used a variety of tools, hand gestures, charts, the blackboard, and other students to get the students to self-correct. If students are simply given answers, rather than being allowed to find the corrections themselves, they won't retain them. However, at the beginning, the teacher expects students to progress, not perform perfectly. The teacher was silent in that he did not model the language, but rather directed the students in using it. It is the students who should be practicing the
there are here two aspects that I really recommend you take note on that. First of all, errors are important and necessary to learning. Why? In order to avoid fossilization, remember, we need to form good linguistic habits. We need to form good linguistic habits. Therefore, we need to work on correcting the errors. And additionally, it says it is the students who should be practicing the language, not the teacher. That's why the teacher works with the student and students work with the language. That's the other characteristic of this method. Remember, I stated that students are not the protagonist, but again, their cognitive learning process. That's the protagonist. That's why it says students should be practicing the language. In that way, students are working on their own cognitive learning process. Please take note of that.
Language, not the teacher. Because the teacher does not supply a model, the students learn to give their full attention to the teacher's cues. They are also encouraged to learn from one another. Indeed, we saw that the students standing in the back were learning from those seated at the table. By listening to the sentences the students wrote towards the end of the lesson, the teacher can verify what particular students have learned that day. This same sort of information was obtained when the teacher asked the students directly what they had learned. Both sources of student feedback help to inform the teacher about what to work on next. Students, in turn, learn to accept responsibility for their own learning.
The other characteristic, students may give feedback among themselves. Now, before I check it with you, all the other aspects that you wrote of the silent way, we may want to watch now the Suggestopedia method. So let's watch it, the video, and then you might start taking notes, and then I comment on that.
I will be demonstrating a language teaching method called Suggestopedia. In particular, I will be demonstrating a brief lesson that would feature the method for which Suggestopedia is known. It's called a concert. And this concert utilizes the use of prompts and acting on behalf of the teacher to demonstrate what they're reading as they read a script aloud. It also has music that plays in the background. For more information, please check the description below. Good morning. Today's lesson is going to focus on using short, simple sentences to describe actions, and these sentences are going to be in first person and present tense. We're going to be using these sentences to describe daily activities that students, such as yourselves, are familiar with. And all I ask that you do to begin with is read through the script that I've given you, see what you do and don't know, and then we'll come together and I'll answer any questions or concerns you have before we move on to the next section. Okay, so now that we've worked through any concerns or questions you had about your initial read through of the script, we can move on to the second part of today's lesson. For this part, I will be reading the script aloud to you, and all you have to do is read along in your head while I read it aloud. Just follow what I'm saying, how I'm saying it. For today's lesson, I'm going to be doing most of the hard work for you. Essentially, you get to just sit back and relax and focus really on intaking the information before I really ask you to reproduce on your own. So let's just go ahead and go through the second read through. I wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning. I brush my hair. I brush my teeth. I get dressed for school. I eat cereal for breakfast. I pack my backpack. I drive to school. I walk to class. I drive back home. I eat a sandwich for lunch. I do my homework. I text my friends. I eat chicken for dinner. I watch television. I take a shower. I put on my pajamas. I go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. And that's it for the second read through. So at this point, before we move on to the last part of today's class, are there any questions you may have that we need to work through before we move on? Anything about pronunciation, maybe? We'll address those before we go on. Okay, so now that we've worked through any questions you may have had after the second part of today's lesson, we can move on to the third and last part of today's lesson. So this time I'm gonna be reading aloud to you again. This time it's gonna be a little different. I'm gonna use the props and pictures to help me act out what I'm saying while I'm saying it. And your job this time is to watch me and listen again. So you won't be needing your script. You won't be reading along this time. I will also have some music playing in the background. This is just to help you relax and focus on the information I'm giving you and really try to take it in. So I'm just going to start the music, and I'm actually going to let the music play for just a few seconds before I actually start reading aloud, just to let us get a chance to get in the mood first. I wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning. I brush my hair. I brush my teeth. I get dressed for school. I eat cereal for breakfast. I pack my backpack. I drive to school. I walk to class. I drive back home. I eat a sandwich for lunch. I do my homework. I text my friends. I eat chicken for dinner. I watch television. I take a shower, I put on my pajamas, I go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. Okay, and that's the last thing we have to do for class today. Next class, we'll focus more on you actually reciting the script yourself. We'll do it together as a class and then we'll break up into smaller pairs. But all I ask that you do for now for homework is read this once before you go to bed and then once again when you first wake up in the morning. And then that's it for today. So I'll see you next class.
All right, so now first I'm going to finish with the silent way. There were more aspects that we could notice in the video of Diane Larsen Freeman. So yes, some games, pronunciation, listen and repeat, taping his fingers to the table, using his fingers to ask for the type of pronunciation expected as the students to relate phonics with colors. Those are the procedures, teaching techniques, and classroom activities. Now, what about the design? Yes, syllabus based on vocabulary, on grammar items. Yes, on vocabulary and grammar items. All right, and grammar. Yep. Grammar items. Also, sitting arrangement in circle, use of props and objects. I couldn't read what does it says. Differences between two ways of pronounce the article the. Yes. Teacher works for the students while the students work on the language. Yes, the one that we said. Errors are important and necessary to learn. Yep, definitely. And teaching should be subordinated to learning. All right. Those were some of the aspects of the silent way approach. Before I continue with the Suggestopedia, I would like to mention if there was something interesting, new, difficult, something that may have called your attention with the silent way. And I'm going to ask directly. Valeria, something that you want to share with us about the silent way? The same question is for Mitzi and for Dulce. Something that may have called your attention, something that you consider difficult, anything that you may find interesting about the silent way method? That's the same question for Mitzi, Dulce, and Valeria. We listen to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Well, the most interesting part to me is the fact that students have to move on their own. Like was can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you because it was like nothing and then continue.
Oh, well, I repeat myself, like the most interesting part is that students can go on their own. Like the teacher is just a resource that students can tend to. That's the most interesting part to me.
All right. Thank you, Valeria. Mitzi and Dulce.
Well, I think that the most important, interesting part to me was
the role of teacher. He at least is a kind of guidance, but in a different way, because students have to speak.
You may say it in Spanish, don't worry.
Okay. Bueno, yo creo que la parte más interesante que se me hizo fue el hecho de, pues en general, ¿no? De Silent Way, ya que normalmente estamos acostumbrados a ver que el maestro hable y hable y hable. Y el hecho de que los alumnos sean los que los tengan que hablar en este caso, hace que la clase sea diferente y creo que eso ayuda, digamos, a internalizar más el idioma, por así decirlo.
De acuerdo, Mitzi. Muy bien, muchas gracias. Dulce María.
Well, what most caught my attention is that the students are not active, even though the teacher is always in silence.
Okay, Dulce. Thank you so much. Now we go back with the Suggestopedia method. What you could notice in that video is the form short of the sentences. Students only use target language, use of images and objects, body movements, definitely. Music helps relax the students to act the sentences. Yes, that's the other technique. They need to act the sentences. Actions and are depicted, no? By a teacher. Actions are depicted by the teacher, but other elements are represented by props. Okay. Props and pictures to learn vocabulary. Now, we are going to watch the second video. It is quite similar to the one we previously watched, but here I'm going to fast forward just to emphasize some aspects that the previous video didn't show. So let's listen, Larsen Freeman.
My name is Diane Larson Freeman, and I'm a teacher educator at the School for International Training. This is the second tape in a 2-tape video series brought to you through the courtesy of the USIA. On this tape, you will see demonstrations of 3 language teaching methods: Suggestopedia, the Silent Way, and the Communicative. All of the methods have a richer repertoire of principles and techniques than can be fully. As you view the tape, try to remain open to what you see. For example, don't dismiss something because you are observing an English as a second language class with students from a number of different countries, and you teach in an English as a foreign language situation where the students are more homogeneous. Ask yourself instead, is there anything valuable here which I can adapt to my own circumstances?
In real teaching context, that's the statement of Larsen Freeman. We need to adopt and adapt some techniques, some strategies for our own teaching context. But, well, let's watch about the Suggestopedia.
Suggestopedia, the first lesson you will see on this videotape, has been developed by Georgy Lazanov. Lazanov believes that we set up psychological barriers to learning. We fear that we will be unable to perform, that we will be limited in our ability to learn, or that we will fail. One result is that we do not use the full mental powers that we have. In order to make better use of our mental reserves, the limitations we think we have need to be desuggested. Suggestopedia, the application of the study of suggestion to pedagogy, has been developed to help students believe that they can be successful, and thus to help them overcome the barriers to learning. Watch how direct and indirect suggestions are made in the lesson. Suggestopedia will be demonstrated by my colleague, Lisa Sparrow.
Okay, good morning. This morning we're going to work with a reading passage.
What I'd like to do is to ask that you get ready by relaxing a little bit. Just sit.
Check the classroom atmosphere, classical music, wallpaper with some specific words, and a poster, chair, and also we can see more on that.
I'm going to put on some different music, and then I'm going.
The tape recorder, a kettle, 2 chairs that I bet they are going to be transformed into a, I don't know, a bed.
To read.
Then check another picture. And the first step that the teacher is going to do is exactly the same. She is going to read the text.
I'm going to read something and I'm going to act it out for you.
So both ways, she's going to read it and she's going to act it out.
And then I'm going to turn the music off and I'm going to read it again, but this time without acting it out. And at that point, I'd like you just to listen and to see how much you remember and you understand.
So in this way, teacher is trying to develop students' memory span. That's why she said, and then we are going to see how much you can remember. So this Suggestopedia method also emphasizes the cognitive development, your cognitive development skills, the development of your cognitive skills.
Okay, so that's how we'll begin. On the floor. Rising from the bed, she tiptoed through the boxes onto her bed. She found the dishes.
Notice how important is here the use of materials. Materials in the form of realia. They come to the classroom with real objects. That's another characteristic, the use of realia. And those materials are really important so that students can figure it out what the text is about.
Her mother had given her. Tomorrow, her roommate would come. But for now, Sarah had a home of her own. And put a kettle of water on to boil. Waiting, she glanced over all her possessions. And then stand up. We're going to read it together and see if we can act it through.
This is the third step. Now, Professor delivered the tape script of this reading, and then students need to act it out at the same time they are reading. Check it, how students are going to act it out.
First, let's see if we can help ourselves remember all of this vocabulary, all these verbs. All right, let's try.
Once again, vocabulary and grammar elements. That's why the syllabus is also built up around grammar items and vocabulary. We may say lexicogrammar elements.
And act it out together. And the idea here is that every time you say something, if you can do an action, that will help you remember more of. So we'll start and we'll read together and act as much as you can. If you need a little space, maybe you want to move over just a little bit so you don't poke other people. Okay. All right. Ready? Okay. Sarah woke up early. Right.
the sun pouring through the apartment window.
The sun pouring through the apartment window.
She stretched lazily, and keep reading with me, and placed her feet one by one on the floor. Good. She tried to decide where to begin. She took a quick sip of coffee and searched out her box of books. She ordered them neatly on the shelf. Then she lifted her suitcase onto the bed. She unlatched the clasps, opened it, and hung her dresses carefully.
Here, as you could check, students now are also practicing, okay? Yes, definitely, the students are, like we may say, they are the first steps they give to pronounce. So here, pronunciation at this stage is not really emphasized. This is a quite a difference within the silent way. It is silent way emphasizes good pronunciation, but here with Suggestopedia, the emphasis is on students acting out, although the pronunciation is not well emphasized at the beginning. Additionally, check how professor tries to lead students to read and at the same time make an association between physical movement and action, physical movement and the reading.
Okay, let's work a little bit on this pronunciation here.
So now that's the stage of being aware of pronunciation, but especially with verbs.
Here are some of the verbs we have, and as you see, I have them coded in colors. Let's see if you can hear what the difference is in the pronunciation. Can you read this one? Tiptoed. Stretched. What's the difference there? Tiptoed. Stretched. This is a D and this is a T. A very interesting aspect of English pronunciation.
So the pronunciation of final ed for regular verbs.
The past tense. Let's try these and see if this is true. Let's read. Tiptoed, ordered, opened, closed, poured, tried, dried, sighed, stretched, placed, glanced, scooped. Do you hear it? Stirred. I'm going to stand in front of this. Now I'm going to say one of these verbs and I each hand. Probably be easiest if everybody had the same one. So if you had your T in your left hand and your D in your right hand.
That's the second step of pronunciation. First, they need to repeat. Then the teacher is going to read it aloud. And then students need to raise their hand by saying if the final ed sounds like a D or as a T.
Okay? I'm going to stand in front of this. Now I'm going to say one of these verbs, and I'd like you to listen carefully and see if you think it ends in a D or a T. All right? Okay, just by listening as best you can. All right. Stretched. Should have the blue. Yeah, the blue. Stretched. It's good. It's listening. Okay, listen. Okay, placed. Blue. glanced, blue. Jello! You're relaxing too much. We need to be relaxed and alert. Okay, relaxed and alert. All right, opened. Hey, good. Okay, that should be pink. Okay, closed. Anna plays it safe. She puts 2 cards up. Right, okay. Tried. 1 into 10. Tried. Okay. Easy because they had an ED on the end. But see if we can work with some of the verbs that aren't. I'm going to throw you the present tense of the verb, and just for your security's sake, we have them here. Wake, woke, lie, lay, put, put. All right. I'll say the present, and I'll throw the ball to you, and if you can say the past. Okay?
The first stage, by playing a game. Throwing the ball is like the hot potato. And then students need to mention the correct pronunciation of the verb in past. So that's the other stage. Professor tries to create that relaxing atmosphere, and now he is trying to ask students to a little bit of infantilize. So they try to become as a child.
Ready? Okay. Put. Good. Lie. Lie. That's always safe. It gives you more time. Lay. Take. Have. 2, 4, 6, 8. Yeah, I think there are even. You might have to, they're 24? Okay, so there should theoretically be partner for everybody. All right, what I'd like to do is have you practice one person reading through and the other person act it out. Okay, just a little bit. All right? Okay, so one person read and the other person act out. You want to read. Okay, Kofi is reading, so then you have to act. Just turn to each other, just in your seat. You don't have to move too much. Just for practice reading. Maybe we'll have time.
So in this stage, students had also have the practice of pronunciation of the verbs in that way. Now they're going to read again. One person is going to read it, and the other is going to act it out. And then by the previous pronunciation practice, it is expected that now students, when they are reading, they have the sufficient background, the previous background, so that now they can pronounce correctly the final endings of the verbs.
Up early.
So you turn.
Going through the apartment window.
I think there's an extra person, so maybe 3 people. Can you read and they 2 act?
She is just lazy.
Okay. I hope you've had a chance to go through it at least once. We now need a volunteer to be Sarah, and we, the class, will read, and one person can come up and see if they can go through the activity. Shukri. Beautiful Sarah. Here she comes. All right, come. Yes. Okay, we need the beautiful music, too. All right, so Sarah can go to bed. And all of us will do the work. We'll read. Okay. He looks very comfortable. Okay, ready? Sarah woke up early. The sun pouring through the apartment window. She stretched lazily and placed her feet one by one on the floor. Rising from bed, she tiptoed through the boxes which lay.
And then now all students are reading and one person is acting out. Okay, so that's the other step.
Everywhere and put a kettle of water on. Sarah don't you think? All right. Now, just to see how much we can work with this and to give you a little bit homework for the next class, I'd like to ask that you turn your paper over. I'm going to give you a short dictation of some of the words. Is this very difficult? Piece of cake. Right. Okay. Relax. Okay. All right. Again, I'm going to read you a few sentences. They're not the same as from the story. They're the same words, but they're different sentences.
The other technique is dictation. She's going to use the same words they have previously checked, the verbs, but obviously she is going to change the subject and complement. So that's the other or the final stage, dictation. Just to confirm that they have inductively learned how to use simple past verbs.
All right. Got that? The same words, familiar words from this reading, but different sentences, okay? She glanced at the dresses which hung in her closet and quickly put them in her suitcase. And quickly put them in her suitcase. Just take a minute and take out this piece of paper and read it through for yourself, trying to remember as best you can some of the pronunciation and the intonation that we've worked with today. Okay? So see you tomorrow. Okay. All right, bye.
The first thing you may have noticed in the demonstration is the atmosphere the teacher sought to create with the music, the posters, and the plants. This is done because learning is facilitated in a pleasant, comfortable environment.
That's the other principle of language learning. Learning is facilitated in a pleasant, comfortable environment. Okay? That's the other language learning principle.
Learning is facilitated in a pleasant, comfortable environment. The teacher also speaks in a reassuring tone of voice, suggesting implicitly that learning the target language will be relaxing and enjoyable. The more confident the students feel, the better they will learn.
That's the other principle. The more confident the students feel, the better they will learn. And yes, remember when we check the Krashen's 5 hypotheses, one of the hypotheses was the affective filter. When that affective filter is high, students are not going to learn as they could. However, that affective filter is lower. In that case, with a relaxed atmosphere and nice atmosphere, learning is going to be is going to take place.
The more confident the students feel, the better they will learn. With the words she uses, she also seeks to activate the learner's imagination, which will also aid their learning. A major step in the learning is the concert phase, during which the teacher acts out the reading with a musical accompaniment. This step is in keeping with Lazanov's observation that communication takes place on two planes. On the one, the linguistic message, the narrative here, is encoded, and on the other are factors which complement the linguistic message, for example, the teacher's actions and the music. When there's a unity
That's the second principle of the theory of language. Language takes in two places, or as it says, yes, in two planes. Communication takes in two planes. The first plane is the mere linguistic aspect. So the use of past, simple past for narrating all the activities. But the second plane is the way we addressed to communicate that narration, no? Those are the paralinguistic elements. The soft tone of voice, the movements, the physical movements associated with the narration.
Between the two planes, learning is enhanced. A pseudo-passive state, such as the state one experiences when listening to a concert, is ideal for overcoming psychological barriers and for taking advantage of learning potential. The material the students are learning needs.
See? And also remember that here the use of classical music tries to enhance students' cognitive processes. That's a way, or the orientation reproducing classical music has to enhance students' learning.
Needs to be activated as well, however. The means of doing this should be varied so as to avoid as much.
Those are some of the characteristics of the materials that says the means of activating the material should be varied and playful. By playful means that should be keeping students' attention. In that way is playful. Not because all the time should be given games. No, not at all. In the sense that materials need to be captive so students' attention is all the time.
Much repetition as possible. Dramatization is one way of doing this, and a particularly valuable way of playfully activating the material. Fantasy reduces barriers to learning. Other means of activating the material used by the teacher were the game with the ball and the dictation. The game helped to create a playful atmosphere, thus indirectly suggesting that learning can be fun.
So that was the Suggestopedia method. We are going to review what you could write here in the theory of language, the design of the Suggestopedia. Body movements of classical music, syllables based on lexical grammar elements, learning facilitating a pleasant environment. Communication takes place on two elements, words. When there's unity, learning is enhanced. Yep. The more confident the students feel, the better they will learn. Yes, infantilization. The means of activated learning should be fun and playful. All right. So now, the same questions. What did you learn? What did you call your attention about this method? Something that you consider useful? Any aspect that you may notice once in your English lessons have been used, or something that you liked, something that you consider is new for you? Anyone else? If not, the same. I'm going to ask some participants. All right. Yes, Daniela?
Something that attracts me a lot is because when I was reading, I thought that the music was just to make the environment more pleasant, but no, is when the time the teacher is, or well, as we were saying, they were like watching daily routines, so they are matching the music, like the rhythm, with what the teacher says. So that attracts me a lot. And I have a question, teacher. I was reading the text, and I didn't know what type of syllabus is this teaching model, but I think it's interactive, right?
Not really interactive. Remember that it's also built up around lexicogrammar elements. So interaction takes place only in some aspects of teaching procedures, but indeed the syllabus it's around lexicogrammar elements.
Thanks, teacher.
You are welcome, Daniela. The same question for Denise, Julian, and the same question for Denise, for Juliana, and for Yuri. We listen to you.
Judith, right?
Yep, exactly.
Well, in this method, Suggestopedia, I noticed that it's important to adapt in the teaching context because cultural issues can be influenced in the way a teacher teach something to students, and the regarding memory span, it's like to make students feel listened, what they could remember about the topic, and I think it's all. And about music can relax students to make a successful class, and that's all.
Okay, Yuri, thank you so much. Now, Juliana.
Well, I think that I personally think that is a great method. Well, in my opinion, but maybe that's irrelevant. But it's nice to see like the contrast, for example, in error suggestion, like how it's not like pushed in a way that it is stressful or could be degrading to students in a way. Therefore, I feel like it's a very passive but effective, because sometimes, like if you like for example, if they don't feel listened, if they don't feel capable, motivation also can decrease. And if the students aren't in a relaxed environment that encourages them to learn, that could be contraproducent. So yeah, I think that Suggestopedia can be very effective. I guess that due to its pedagogy, it could be most effective in younger people, especially like in general. Like it could be effective for everyone, but especially for younger people, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you so much, Juliana. Now, before I read what Alfredo and Denise wrote, I would like to ask the same question for Sonia, please. I found something somewhere else that Suggestopedia is based on two hemisphere brain theory. We're aware now that the theory is debunked. I can understand why so many theories keep perpetuating that each hemisphere has a function when studies has proven that it's just not true. There are specialized regions on the brain, but hemispheres themselves are not specialized. Well, remember that this theory was we may say, emerged in the 70s. In those years, studies about neurolinguistic and all that stuff didn't existed, nor they were developed as now we know it. However, we need to contextualize Suggestopedia, and we may say that this method emerged as a reaction against the classical grammar teaching method, the grammar translation method, or the direct method, in the sense that students need to participate, to have like an active role. However, as we may have checked, students' active participation is not at so in a definite manner, but at least some bits and pieces of students' participation. That's why I am emphasizing over and over that the protagonist of the lessons is the cognitive learning process of students, not students per se. Students per se, we are going to check it when we review microunit number 3. And then you will check it. The name of, yes, for sure, the name of this, Suggestopedia, Total Physical Response, Silent Way, they are called humanistic approaches in the sense that now students need to take like an active role. By active role in those times, it was considered that now students need to practice more, to take responsibility of their own learning with the help of the teacher. Whereas in the previous methods, direct method, that was the Berlitz method, audiolingual method, and all those methods, teacher was responsible for students' learning, not the other way around, as the humanistic approaches propose, that students are responsible for their own learning process. What Denise comment is, well, for me, it's interesting that the students have the primary roles of listener and performer. Yep, exactly, because usually teacher is who take the role of performing. And that role was really performed when the grammar translation, audiolingual, direct method were in vogue. No, in those moments, teachers' performing role was the primacy. But now with the humanistic approaches, students' role is to take responsibility of their own learning process, and also, as Denise mentioned, the role of listeners and performers. Okay, so now Sonia, we can listen to you, please.
Yes, teacher. Well, all the method caught my attention because first teacher teach some vocabulary and put into practice pronunciation, and then when the students are more familiar with this vocabulary, the teacher make a sentence, and then they make a reading. And in this case, teacher is very friendly, and it helps because the classroom is more comfortable for the students, and I think this makes that students can participate. And I think this method put into practice all the skills, and it helped very much to students.
And also, as you mentioned, thank you, Sonia, special attention should be placed with how to create a good classroom atmosphere. In that way, as teachers, we make sure that learning is going to be enhanced. So that's the, we may say, the remarkable part of this approach. Okay. Now we are about to finish this micro unit of competence. I'm going to share with you the screen. Remember that we are here in the carpeta gris of contenidos. So once again, we are here in the carpeta gris of contenidos. Then we click here on microreading of competency number 1. Then we go to the full humanistic approaches. Then, oops, we go here. Check this part. Aquí están los materiales. En esto que dice actividad, aquí no se entrega nada, absolutamente nada. Solamente aquí tienen los materiales necesarios para poder realizar la entrega de esto, de la actividad. El video educativo originalmente se había sugerido Pautún, pero pueden ustedes, como aquí les decía, pueden utilizar cualquier otra aplicación. Aquí mismo se los puse para que se enfatizara. De hecho, vean, aunque aquí mencionaba Pautún, aquí mismo ya estaba mencionado que pueden utilizar cualquier otra aplicación. Se los volví aquí a mencionar junto. Luego, la fecha de entrega para que dé tiempo y también tengan ustedes organización en sus actividades, la extendí hasta el 7 de octubre, jueves 7 de octubre. Lo mismo del siguiente método de Community Language Learning que vamos a estar viendo, próxima clase, estaremos también aquí, los materiales están, y lo mismo, el video educativo también ya aquí le puse nuevamente la nota de que lo pueden hacer con otra aplicación diferente de Powtoon, ¿sí? Y lo mismo, está para entregarse al 7 de octubre. Siguiente detalle, vean que ya tenemos nuestra sesión para que diseñen su clase con respecto a los métodos. Y esta clase van a estar llevándose a cabo la siguiente semana, del 4 al 8. En consecuencia, este miércoles, ¿qué? Recuérdenme, 29. No, jueves 30. Con ustedes son martes y jueves. Entonces, este jueves 30 nos vamos a conectar a las 10 de la mañana para que veamos, uno, el Community Language Learning, ¿vale? Lo revisemos. Y para que también en una, no me voy a llevar toda la clase con el Community Language Learning. Y en segunda, para que pueda yo también estar viendo con ustedes todos aquellos aspectos de cómo planear su clase, cómo poder diseñar su lesson plan y sobre todo para que podamos aclarar dudas. Lo que yo quiero es que más o menos entre las 10 y antes de las 11 terminemos el Community Language Learning, para que de ahí nos vayamos y para que de ahí entonces el resto de la clase podamos nosotros diseñar su actividad de cómo la van a enseñar y puedan seleccionar el método bajo el cual quieren ustedes enseñar. Igual, vamos a trabajar en los equipos, pero del mismo modo. Vamos a tratar de que entre todos los equipos quede repartido tanto de los métodos viejos como de los métodos humanistas. No sé si hasta ahorita tengan alguna duda, comentario o pregunta, por favor, les escucho.
Yo tengo una.
Adelante, Juliana.
Y ya para, o sea, el día que se presentarán las clases, que bueno, que vamos a comenzar, más o menos cuándo va a ser, si hay. O sea, que ya vamos a hacer como los equipos de clase, pues, presentar.
Sí. No es que los vayan ustedes a presentar con algún grupo específico, o sea, que tengan que pedir permiso con algún profesor, no. La van a hacer aquí mismo. Nosotros vamos a funcionar también como estudiantes y en el momento que el equipo pase como profesores, asumen el rol de profesores y nosotros asumiremos el rol de estudiantes. Eso será justamente como lo tenemos aquí marcado en la semana del 4 al 8 de octubre, o sea, la siguiente semana.
Y va a ser, tendremos que prender cámara, por ejemplo. Bueno, depende, ¿no?
Exactamente, a lo que voy es...
por ejemplo, en el que tiene un pointer y van con los objetos y todo eso.
Sí, sí, definitivamente sí. De hecho, no obstante que den ustedes hasta una lección de gramática, cuando les toque pasar a dar su clase, sí van a estar al momento de que el maestro habla, sí van a tener que encender su cámara. Ya que deje de hablar el maestro, la apagan y habla el otro maestro, ya enciende su cámara el otro maestro. Sobre todo vean bien que aquí el énfasis es, no obstante cualquiera de los métodos humanistas, ahí se van a dar cuenta que sí tiene que tenerse como que esa interacción el maestro, o al menos tiene que ver el alumno los gestos del maestro, las formas en que hace que enfatice y de todo ese modo. Pero sí, definitivamente, sí lo van a tener que abrir solamente por ese periodo mientras esté dando la clase el maestro. Ya una vez que deje de hablar el maestro, ya la apaga. ¿Lo pregunta porque tiene alguna dificultad tecnológica?
Bueno, de repente sí, de repente se va aquí el internet. Vivo en San Martín por donde está Banderilla y luego sí se nos ha ido la luz y así. Pero yo creo que, o sea, no es así súper... yo creo que sí podría, pues espero que no haya ninguna dificultad.
Claro, y de todos modos, en el caso de que existiera, usted nos la notifica. O sea, el detalle es el siguiente, al estar preparados en el equipo es, aunque digamos, tú vas a estar modelando con los gestos y yo voy a estar aquí ahora haciendo las repeticiones, digamos que estamos en el equipo y trabajamos sobre el método de la Suggestopedia. Entonces, de momento puede ser que ahí ya tú me avisas como compañera de equipo, oye, ¿sabes qué, Esteban? No puedo porque ahorita tengo la dificultad, pero te voy a apoyar haciendo esto. Ah, ok, entonces yo en tu lugar voy a estar modelando los gestos que a ti te tocaban hacer y ya tú me vas a estar entonces apoyando con respecto, por ejemplo, a estar haciendo las repeticiones solamente, aunque no salgas visualmente en la cámara. O sea, de ese modo es como pienso que el mismo jueves nos podemos organizar. Esa es mi intención, que el mismo jueves nos podemos organizar en los equipos. ¿Sí me explico?
Sí, gracias, profe.
Correcto. ¿Alguien más? Adelante, Alfredo.
Bueno, nada más para clarificar entonces, eso, es que todavía estoy un poco fuera de foco con esto del microteaching. Los equipos, leo que se pueden hacer desde par hasta 5 o van a ser los mismos equipos que ya tenemos asignados.
Efectivamente, como ustedes mejor se acomoden. Puede ser que sean los mismos equipos que tienen asignados y trabajan, o dividir dentro del mismo equipo. ¿A qué me refiero? Puede ser que dentro del mismo equipo unos digan, no, pero es que yo quería el Grammar Translation, y otros digan, no, es que yo quería presentar el del Silent Way. Entonces pueden decir, bueno, no hay problema. Nosotros en el mismo equipo, nosotros 3 vamos a presentar del Silent Way y nosotros 4 vamos a presentar del Grammar Translation sin ningún problema.
¿Y la asignación de los métodos es a decisión nuestra, a criterio nuestro?
Entre que criterio de ustedes y entre que evitando que se repitan. Un ejemplo, si de momento veo que hay 2 equipos que tienen asignado el mismo, no sé, Total Physical Response, entonces decir no, uno solo va a ser el de Total Physical Response. Para eso entonces ya ahí es en donde a mí me va a tocar asignarles. Solamente en el caso de que se repitan 2 equipos que tengan el mismo método. Pero de ahí en fuera pueden ustedes seleccionarlo. Y les repito, no obstante que dentro del mismo equipo, digamos, 3 estuvieron de acuerdo con el Ground Translation y los otros 4 estuvieron de acuerdo que con el Total Physical Response, no hay problema. Al interior se pueden también subdividir. 3 van a presentar de Ground Translation y los otros 4 van a presentar de Total Physical Response. No sé si aclaré la duda.
Sí, sí, maestro, ya quedó un poquito más claro. Pues espero que sí salga todo perfecto. Vamos a echarle muchas ganas.
Así es. Sí, adelante, ¿quién habla?
Alexa,
Sí,
¿nos
Alexa.
podría repetir de nuevo la cantidad de integrantes por equipo? O...
Ajá, lo que yo decía es, digamos, pueden ustedes decidir dentro del mismo equipo, Los 5 o 7 miembros del equipo, ok, todos nos ponemos de acuerdo y trabajamos sobre el Silent Way. Puede resultar a lo mejor que dentro del mismo equipo digan, 3 de ellos digan, no, nosotros no queremos Silent Way, queremos ver Direct Method. Entonces no hay ningún problema. Dentro del mismo equipo, 3 van a trabajar con el Direct Method y los otros 4 van a trabajar con el Silent Way. No hay ningún problema. Pero el detalle es de que sí mejor llegaran como equipo a un solo acuerdo. No obstante, les repito, si hay 3 compañeros que quieren trabajar un método distinto al interior del equipo, lo pueden trabajar y no hay ningún problema. Sobre todo esto para las sesiones de microenseñanza, de microteaching. ¿Sí me expliqué?
Sí, profe, muchas gracias.
Sí, de acuerdo. Mientras, si surge alguna otra duda o eso, háganmelo saber, pero rapidito les voy a pasar lista para que yo y ustedes vayamos a nuestra clase siguiente. 2809, Guadalupe.
Presente.
Gracias. Denise, que sí respondió por chat. José Adrián. ¿Está José
Presente.
Adrián? Gracias. Ángel de Jesús. ¿Se encuentra Ángel de Jesús?
Presente.
Muy bien. Alfredo, sí está.
Presente.
Rodrigo, gracias. Rodrigo Fita.
Presente.
Gracias. Jennifer García.
Presente.
Gracias. Noemí. Ok, Fabiola. Valeria.
Presente.
Gracias. Juliana.
Presente.
Gracias. Fabián.
Presente.
Gracias. Jennifer López. Saraí.
Presente.
Gracias.
Presente.
Gracias. Yuritsi. Jessica. Gracias. Liliana. De ahí seguimos con José Eduardo. Mitzi.
Presente.
Gracias. Daniela.
Presente.
Alexa. Gracias.
Presente.
Gracias. Luisa.
Presente.
Sonia, ya tomé nota. Y Miguel Ángel Julio.
Presente.
Gracias. Y Dulce María.
Presente.
Listo. Noemí, muy bien. Listo. Entonces, les digo, nos conectamos el próximo jueves 30. Ya